we're going to move from gender to youth. We're going to build from the youth paper that we published last year, debated at the global convening last year. Sergio, do you want to introduce yourself and also introduce who helped you with this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody. I will turn my camera on or off, rather, after introducing my two guest speakers. I will have the delight of hosting Willis Odiambo from AGRA and Vicky Aridi from SNV. Just as a matter of context, we are talking today about the youth programming in the context of professionalization of farmer organizations and also in the context of BDS service providers. A little bit of history there. In late 2024, AMEA, the membership of AMEA said, we need to discuss about youth, and we started gathering several papers, several practices, several examples that members were putting forward. And we said we need to synthesize this. And throughout 2025, we put together the AMEA position paper that is called Empowering Youth in Agriculture through Inclusive Farmer Organizations and Forward-Thinking Partnerships. That is a synthesis of everything that we had seen and discussed, from different approaches that we had seen in the past to specific examples and case studies. And what it did is it basically reframed youth in three categories, between ages 12 to 35 and more, and just looking at specific examples and targeted approaches that different organizations in different contexts, geographic realities had been applying. And we just synthesized that in that paper. For 2026, then we decided, okay, so let's take this forward. And now let's dig deep. Let's do a deep dive with two of the most leading premier implementing partners of youth programming. And that's why we decided to dive in deep conversation with AGRA and SNV. And the summary of that is what we will be presenting today. And I would like to first start with Willis Odiambo. The conversation analyzing the AMEA position paper and what AGRA is seeing in the field in their practices right now, the three themes that came very prominent were that AGRA is seeing that they're moving, or there's a need to move from youth inclusion to youth intelligence, and he'll talk about that. Then the importance of the ecosystem, that the ecosystem needs to be ready if we're going to do important and relevant youth programming. And in this context of this learning event, ecosystems are important. And then looking forward and beyond short-term outputs. So I will just let Willis introduce himself and just speak about these three themes and give us a few examples in the next 5 minutes or so. Willis, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergio, and thank you, AMEA, for bringing together these important reflections through the Youth Empowerment Workstream Position paper. My name is Willis. As has been mentioned, I work at AGRA as a specialist youth in agriculture, and our work extends across the youth thematic area, but strong with ecosystem strengthening. So maybe I'll go straight into this presentation. So as I reviewed the paper, I was really, really struck by how strongly it resonates with what we have been learning at AGRA through our work across multiple African countries. So this paper captures many important practices. I would like to highlight three themes that I believe will become increasingly important as we think about the future of youth empowerment in agri-food systems. So the first is a shift from what I would call youth inclusion to what we want to call youth intelligence. So for several years now, youth programs have started with a very simple assumption that you identify young people, you mobilize them, and then you provide your support. But increasingly, we are learning that this approach is not very sufficient because youth are not a homogeneous group. Through our partnership with the Mastercard Foundation and a program called YEFA, that is Youth Entrepreneurship for the Future of Food and Agriculture, we invested significantly in profiling and segmenting exercises in countries like Mali, Tanzania, and Mozambique. In Mali, for instance, we identified 9 distinct youth profiles, and these young people live in the same country and oftentimes in the same communities, yet they have very different aspirations, different motivations, different opportunities, and actually different constraints as well. Some of them viewed agriculture as a family legacy and a pathway to prosperity, while others associated it with, poverty and wanted opportunities elsewhere in the value chain. Some were interested in production, while others were more attracted to agribusiness services, technology, processing, and sometimes even value addition. So one of our key lessons was that profiling should not be treated as a research exercise that happens after program design. Profiling is program design itself, it's part of it. If we do not first understand who young people are, what they aspire to become, and what barriers they face, we risk designing solutions that nobody actually wants. I'll give you an example. In Rwanda, we learned that mobilizing large numbers of young people before understanding their aspirations can create significant mismatches between available opportunities and youth expectations. So that lesson fundamentally changed how we think about youth engagement. And going to the second theme about ecosystem readiness, it really matters a lot. Even when we understand youth needs, success is not guaranteed if the surrounding ecosystem is unable to respond. Across several programs, we discovered that many organizations or financial institutions and even service providers were not equipped to support the diversity of needs emerging from our youth profiling work. Some partners were designed to deliver standardized interventions rather than adaptive, youth-responsive solutions. Others lacked the skill. Others also lacked the technical capacity, and others also lacked just the flexibility that is needed to accommodate these variant needs. So this led us towards a hybrid partnership model that combines the strength of international organizations, local institutions, governments, definitely, financial institutions, and private sector actors. So what became increasingly very clear is that youth empowerment is not simply a youth challenge. It is an ecosystem challenge. We must approach it from an ecosystem perspective. One example, again, from Rwanda, where there was a very interesting collaboration between Equity Bank Rwanda, some microfinance institutions, one of the government ministries, and then other of our implementing partners. It helped us to unlock a challenge that we had been facing since the onset of our program there, and that is financial inclusion for young entrepreneurs. And from this, we learned that when institutions work together, they often become more effective than working alone, because I don't want to go to details into the actual lesson, but at least we were able to see that working together is better than working alone. I think this is a very obvious lesson anyway. As practitioners, we therefore need to spend as much time assessing ecosystem readiness as we spend assessing youth readiness.
Sorry,
they're both important.
Sergio, I think we can now see one screen on top of the other, and we don't see the full presentation mode. Can you switch back to how it was?
Okay.
There we go. That's
Yes,
much better.
that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, so going into the third and final theme is that I think there is a need to look beyond short-term outputs. This is a trap that many programs are falling into. So many programs are often judged by numbers. We are talking about numbers and numbers and numbers. How many youths we've trained, how many have been financed, how many have been reached. So these metrics, they are important, but they're not necessarily telling us whether lasting change has occurred. So at AGRA, we have increasingly adopted what I would describe as a dual track approach, where we continue definitely delivering the outputs expected by our funding partners, but at the same time, we invest in experimentation. We also invest in institutional strengthening because we believe institutions are what will deliver the lasting change. And then we also invest significantly in ecosystem coordination as well as learning. So we believe these are the ingredients of success. Importantly, we also believe we need to become more comfortable documenting failures, not just success. Youth empowerment in agri-food systems remains a relatively young field. I'm sure you all understand this. If we only share what worked and hide what did not, we will slow down collective learning across the sector, which is very, very critical. Ultimately, our ambition should be bigger than delivering project outputs. And we should aim to leave behind stronger institutions, stronger partnerships, stronger financial systems, and ultimately stronger ecosystems that will continue to create these opportunities for the young people long after our programs have closed. So as I conclude, maybe just one thing I can say is that maybe as a message, my final message, youth empowerment is not primarily about helping young people fit into existing systems. I think, and in our perspective, it is about building the systems that are responsive enough to unlock the potential that young people really possess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Willis.
Sergio.
Thank you very much. We asked the same question from SNV, another premier organization implementing youth programming across the board. And interestingly, the responses from SNV were concentrated on also there's a need to focus on the initial design, integrating youth voice into design, and then looking at scale and sustainability and the measurement of the progress as well. So I will let Vicky Aridi to talk about that. Please introduce yourself and just talk to us about the three themes that emerged from our conversation, Vicky, please.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt as well, but I know there's time pressure on Vicky and others actually. So so if we can do this in the next 5 minutes, I think we'll have a good session for the breakout, you know.
Perfect.
No, thank you, Mark. I know when you're the last speaker, you must keep time, so I'll ensure I keep time. My name is Vicky Aridi. I work with SNV. We are an INGO headquartered in The Hague. However, when we look at our portfolio for youth employment and entrepreneurship, we span across 10 countries in Africa and Asia. And I serve as the Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Learning and Knowledge Management Advisor. I know, quite a mouthful. But just to share a little bit and building up on what Willis shared, I think when we looked at the AMEA position paper and the conversation, these themes just kept coming up. And really, when we think about youth voice in design, something that we always start to think about and really tied to what Willis said on young people are not a homogeneous group, how can we start to think about, not putting young people in boxes, but really their aspirations, so that youth intelligence aspect, we start every project with a market scan. And this market scan is quite comprehensive because it looks both at the demand and the supply side. For the demand side, trying to unpack what are the aspirations and ambitions of young people to engage along different value chains and sectors. And when you look at the supply side, what are the prospects, both from a market and trade lens, from an economic opportunities lens, and also what are some of the systemic barriers? And we do this more or less on an annual basis because, as you know, the market is always evolving and it's always good to just, keep up to date. And something else when we think about integrating youth voices in design, a model that has really worked for us is a youth champion model. So in one of our projects in Tanzania, we really institutionalized this model by looking at who are the young entrepreneurs and agripreneurs within the space and across value chains who have confidence, leadership, capacity and market engagement expertise, and who can serve as youth champions when we look at different value chains. And these young champions serve as advisors through our governance structures. Their model farms serve as learning centers for other young people, and also they serve as peer mentors and creating that space for peer-to-peer learning. I know several of us on the call are in organizations where we have youth advisory panels or boards, or we know of some, but this is very critical, and not being tokenistic, but saying how can these panels be embedded across our governance structures and being very intentional about it. And we have a program in Rwanda where we are being funded by the MasterCard Foundation. It's called the Youth Entrepreneurship in Agriculture. And really, from the start, that youth advisory panel was a key component of our governance structures to be able to provide insights on what's working, what's not. How can we ensure that whatever we're doing is youth informed, youth driven, and meeting youth where they are? And moving on to scale and sustainability, I know Willis talked a little bit about ecosystem readiness. And even when you think about the ecosystem and the sectors we work in, it's always important to look at scale and sustainability from the lens of who owns this when we leave and doing it from the start. And so this is something that we have really embodied as SNV. And just to share a particular example, we did a project in Ethiopia. And so this was a very interesting market systems development initiative where we're bringing together different ecosystem actors and looking to pilot various interventions within the labor systems, working with SMEs and skilling. And so even as we were piloting interventions, we were also identifying what are the scalable models that other ecosystems actors that we're working with can think about adapting, adopting, and expanding. And this was a good model because rather than waiting for long-term implementation, we're trying to even as we test the model and pilot, we're able to encourage other actors to crowdsource and crowd in around the successful approaches, thus accelerating scale. And I think something we're starting to see more and more at SNV is not working just as, direct implementers all the time, but facilitators of implementation. So trying to see how do we bring on board other local ecosystem actors who can implement and really own it, especially as we think about localization and having local approaches drive forward change when we talk about youth employment. I think something that's also a big learning for us is when we talk a lot about demand-driven education, how do we ensure that some of it is also integrated within education systems? And something that we learned is through one of our projects in Zambia was working directly with the TVET institutions to see are there opportunities to integrate some of the curricula that is aligned to the market demand into the education system is key. And the last piece I'll talk about is really beyond jobs. So I know for a lot of us working within this space, the first two outcomes we always calculate is how many jobs have we created, how many enterprises have reached scale. But what we're finding more and more is how do we have that vision as Willis was saying, that long-term orientation and start to look at things like agency, confidence, financial well-being as long-term metrics. And also seeing how when we skill young people, it stays with young people beyond the project closure. So what has been the impact of those competencies in their day-to-day lives, even as they think about economic transitions? So those are some of the interesting findings that came up from also our own experience. I hope I've kept to your 5 minutes.
Yeah, I won't say you kept quite to the other 5 minutes, but as usual, it's like all the speakers come up with really interesting points. So it's a bit difficult to stop you sometimes. Sergio, do you want to just wrap up very quickly?
Yes, so what we discovered is that there are emerging consensus between the position paper that we developed, which again captures a wide range of experiences, approaches, and learnings with what's happening today in the field through these two big organizations. We'll reserve the more discussion for the breakout rooms. Thank you very much.